Hello, everybody, to the Open dApp Framework proposal session. And today's title is Project Management Tools and Introduction to Task Management Framework session. Our agenda is to introduce a little bit of this proposal and then quickly go over what happened last time. And then we jump into the question, what tools you have been using for project management? Then we have a bit of a brainstorm session, write that down. Then we look at the results, but we don't do a discussion. So we then take a new question. What does the tool do for you? You elaborate a bit of these tools you were choosing. If you had like too many of them, you could pinpoint to like few of them. And then we have a 20-minute discussion about these tools. We go around, share about our experiences. And then we take another question, how does the tools you are using shape your work culture? So I noted that as a green, so that's another like a discussion phase we're gonna have. After that, we check I will demo Singularity and translation task process, which is then related to that framework we are building. And finally, in the closing topics, we discuss what we learned from that demo and how could we use it for, and some other ideas we popped up while discussing, like how could we proceed to the next session and the feedback. So jumping into the introduction, so the proposal name Open dApp Framework was funded in Fund 9, and our problem statement was there is no general framework for decentralized project management, decentralized applications. And so we set out to conduct an analysis of existing project management applications to provide general open source framework and document it as a project-based learning material models. So the thing we're doing here is we are now conducting the analysis on like trying to kind of explore our community and what tools they use. And then when we do this, this will provide a snapshot of use cases of various community nodes, what they do have in common, and what differentiates them. So yeah, we tend to do a function analysis of the common use cases and consider various abstract models or design patterns that may be used in specific circumstances. Now, when I go what we discussed last week, then one mention is that this is a standalone session, so we will be doing fine without knowing what happened last session. But you're interested what analysis we did previously, then in the top corner there is actually a link and you can explore, and we have a YouTube session. But this today's session is a lot more to find out what tools people are already using and what are they using them for. And then this is like as a background information for to create this framework we're trying to build and figure out in these 4 sessions. And also why we do this, we kind of materialize it into learning models. So that's the instruction. I hope that was as clear as it could be. And now the first question, and to then try to impose what tools are they? Now I can also give the motherboard. So this is the interaction point. Yeah, so what tools are you using for project management? And then like an alternative, do you have your own tools or a dashboard or some platforms or like that you're using? And then here is like examples on the left side, like Dwork, Jira board, Discord, Notion, GitHub, Miraboard, Google Suite, any kind of these, so that perhaps could already give some ideas of what it's used for project management. And then everybody take one of these boxes. So I created, if you zoom out, you can see like a list of them. Today we are 6 people in the session, so I don't have to create more of that. And simply take one of these white boxes. And there is one more extra experiment we're trying to do is when you think of a tool, check which box it could fit to. Is it like open source, or is it a paid service or a product that you're using, or is it custom made or self-made tool you're using? And if it's like, I don't really know which this fits, but none of them is like, or it, all of them, and let's say weird combination, then let's use the other section. And then let's see, perhaps we can learn something new from that later. Yeah, any questions? That's like.
So each one of these squares of 4, like groupings of 4 with the open, and then we put in a new tool for each one.
So yeah, okay, let's start from example then. What I use is basically dwork. I can see from examples. So now, to me, this dwork is not an open source, so I actually put it in the wrong section. To me, it's like
paid service product. Yeah,
yeah, but
it's not paid though.
So it's complicated. So that's so
right.
Right. And but yeah, and this is cool too. And perhaps it's good if you think in terms of like one project. If you like, what I'm like most involved with, and then I could say like, okay, I mean this project for me, like this open dApp framework, I use dwork for that. Obviously, as you can see, we are working on my robot, so we are doing work on here too. We share information. Discord is the way we manage our communication, and oh yeah, Discord is, to me, it's a paid service. My robot is also paid for me.
Oh, I see. So each of us will take one of these quadrants, or sets of 4, and then we'll break it up into, how they're open source, paid, or yeah. Okay, I see what you're saying. So yeah.
And you don't have to like. Right now, I gave an example of doing it from like project first approach, but you can simply just bring out like main tools you usually used to, and then yeah, do it that way. So right now it's like a brainstorming of all of these tools, and then we aggregate them.
Okay, I think I got it. So I'll just take this one here. I guess it's sort of rerun into like, what is project management? Like, you can draw a big box around that.
Yeah. True. Because now when I
well, it's like, because it's a communicate, like for instance, I was thinking of like Figma as a tool, which is really for making images, and we make images for our meetup.com. But like for example, like the tool that you use to create your communications, is that a project management tool?
To me it is, and I already got like a fuzzy feeling, like when you asked like, is this a project man tool? And then I looked at my Swarm Treasury Manager, like, oh, well, we do bundle transactions, but we don't manage projects. It's just auditing. So there are perhaps some situations which you could say no, but then again, it kind of signals like the financial state of a project. So it's then again, it's like, okay, it is project manager. So
right.
Right. So we may need to start.
What about Polis, like to gauge, like for distributed decision making, like consens?
Yeah, I think put all down, like
let's put it all down, then we'll figure it out. Yeah.
Because the next question will be, what does the tool do for you? And then we can like pull from that.
Yep.
I see, yeah. there may be dangers, but right now I don't see a danger of having like tools which are not related
Too
to
many.
project management.
Yeah. Oh, well, Zoom.
So,
It's definitely project management. All of a sudden, this is great. I'm having a good time. Thank you. Ooh, yeah. But I'm like, wow, we don't, and I'm thinking of C4C and Little Fish and the other communities, Facilitators Collective. And I don't know open source tool is jumping out at me that we use. Or custom made tools. And it seems like we would be making our own tools.
yeah, that's crazy. All right.
Renaissance actual paper and pens.
Yeah, there you go. Oh,
It's true, we really do.
Yep, I'm putting that down. That's a self-made tool. Thank you, Andre. Yep, paper and pen, I'm doing it. Paper, pen, 3x5 card. 3x5 card. And what about like methods as a tool? It's not a, for instance, I do a 3x5 card, kind of personal project management, information management protocol or method. Is that a tool? It's not a.
Well, it's an complicated and it's other, and it's a kind of service what was taught.
Yeah.
Paper. So yeah, I will actually put it down and then see later. If it's invalid approach, then we just know that how to like approach it. But if it's something that, oh, these are also tools, then our world just expands tenfold.
Yeah.
We're going to jump to the next stage, where we take a question, what does the tool do for you? So from your side, you could just come up with these project management tools. You can see the examples we used. And if you're also using the same tool, you could describe what does the tool do for you. And there are some also in 4 quadrants now that we're trying to kind of see distill this information even further. Like, has the tool produced you any extra work? If yes, what are those? And here I don't have actually examples. And this is increases micromanagement of tasks. And then I guess increases micromanagement of tasks for the T work. Not sure what was the example. And then what output these tools have provided to you. One was visual repetition of a process. So that would be a Miro board. Again, I guess we should include, actually, yeah, maybe if we, well, now this is a dangerous point. If you don't include the tool we are describing, then later we may have just an overhead of trying to figure out what tools can do this, but alternatively, we could find like use cases where somebody described the use of Miro board, but then that same description was applied to Notion or some other tools, and that could be like a commonality, an interesting pattern to find. Yeah, and then like final question, what do you do with the tool? And then somebody gave an example. I organize all the project tasks in the same place. Feels like fieldwork again. So these are the questions, and then they are color coded so that we could aggregate them together and see what's similar. Any questions about that? Because I just created a new new logic.
I will definitely fill all that in. Most of the tools that we have chosen to use do require, it's almost like a balance game where we're doing a trade-off. We're trading off our daily frustrations for a large upfront investment of time. So ClickUp, Notion, Obsidian, all these tools require a very fairly, somewhat steep learning curve. to trade off the daily frustrations that we have. So I don't know if like, are we attempting to measure, you know, that trade-off in a sense?
Right now, not, but I guess that will come out with the discussion. So right now you mentioned ClickUp and Notion, so that you could bring these tools up. I created this 4th quadrant for you. ClickUp is, I guess, paid service, and Notion is, I don't know, I assume open source. And now you answer basically how has the tool produced you any extra work? If yes, what are those? So if Notion has produced any extra work, and you mentioned that, like that negative effect, and then you can describe that negative. And then what output these tools have provided to you, and also explain what the Notion outcomes are. Like it has helped you improve to describe or like the framework to somebody easier compared to like basically what you use it for and what do you do with the tool. So some activity. So I'm using it for writing down logic or something. And if you don't have for stuff, and if you don't know, but basically all the tools you're coming up with, try to brainstorm as many different solutions, and then in 5 minutes we kind of aggregate and see what we see the patterns, learn something, and share then the topics between each other in the next 50 minutes. And I think we have spent 5 minutes.
Okay.
How does people feel?
It's I mean, it's good to go over the tools in this way. This is this is insightful. Just asking like what these tools do for you, and you know, it's sort of a good exercise. And it's sometimes not as clear. For instance, I did D work and I'm like, oh yeah, what does it export? You know, and there's some things that jump out that is really great. Like it does define tasks, you know, and it's like, if it goes in a D work, kind of like Google Calendar. Oh, Google Calendar is a great project management tool, because then it's a discrete unit. It kind of makes packets, you know, and you can eat packets, or it makes meals. It's not an ingredient. It's like it takes all the ingredients and it makes a lunch.
Yeah. And I guess already what I see is that when we would try to connect all of these, we could create like a cyclical evolution of all of these tools. Like one information goes to another, and that creates opportunity for another, and then it's kind of goes around, and just the activities in between are the things what add value to these outputs.
Yeah, like a map or a system, you know, a process. The information comes in, then stuff happens, and then stuff comes out. Is that what you're sort of thinking?
Yep. Because okay. Wonder, shall we aggregate them together and see, or we simply just start from one edge, take one sticky note, and see who had similar stuff? Or let's, okay. So why not? Let's just take one sticky note at a time and see what happens. Are you guys? So I'm not wondering if we add them all together. It's like I think not needed. So on the left side we have this T-work task. I think you're focused only the T-work, or you have more stuff on the left side?
I was working on this very first one on the left, D work, and I wrote it to like, does it produce extra work? And you create a task, and then you have to assign a person or let them assign it, and then moving it through the different stages, the task, you know, once a task is created. and then deciding when it's done, like how to make the payment. I don't know if that's extra work, but it is the work that goes on in there. And just as a caveat, as a little side, is that it does really require more. There is a lot of work that has to go into it to literally work with it in order to get the value out of it. It's not sort of you make the task and it's automatic, you know. None of these tools are punched or magic bullets or magic buttons that you just press and stuff happens. A lot of the work is automated in the background, but it still requires a lot of work. And that's the insight. This, you know, does it produce extra work? And it's like, yeah, there is work.
Yeah, I do also feel like it forces you to like do a minimum operations in order for that dwork to actually produce any value. And I noticed Curtis also added here, if you don't have a project management process, then this can require you to do so. But if you do have a process, this tool can translate that fairly good. It does not include detailed operations, which means for the level of depth insight, this will require another PM tool like ClickUp or Agile. So yeah, for some, the dwork is already very detailed, but yeah, actually to call all the nuances, you can't really have it. So can you share what do you use ClickUp for and like how to improve it?
I'm sorry, Tivo, was that in response to my note?
Yeah.
So what do I use ClickUp for differently than dwork? Right, that's what you're asking.
Yeah, you also have like an extra work on the ClickUp. So what?
So both, yeah, I think just like Newman said, any project management tool requires some finesse and customization. However, there are some project management tools that are a platform and they've grown their community large enough to where people now start to develop templates that have common traits, and those templates are closer to an out-of-the-box experience that can get you, you know, you can try to adopt one of those templates and just learn how to use it. Fairly simple, and that should be enough for a lot of people. But when you're trying to get specific metrics out of the, you know, your project management tool, then you sort of need to build that in. So with dwork, for instance, if I wanted sprint points and to be able to assign everybody their allotted sprint points. So this person works 10 hours a week, this person works 40 hours a week, this person works 60 hours a week. We can actually divvy up how many tasks that person can take on, or how many they can be assigned, whereas dwork just does not have that function.
Okay, so yeah, more functionality to manage the nuances of project management.
Yes.
Moving to the left, we have Gitbook and actual paper. So who has this quadrant? And
That was me.
Want to share some learnings?
I mean, yeah, I guess for the particular project that I'm talking about, I did find myself wondering whether Gitbook was the right tool, because I think it manufactured a certain amount of barrier and limited the amount of co-production because a lot of the project participants were not that familiar with it. It's not that there's that much of a learning curve, but it was just like people tend to be like, oh God, another tool. I don't know if I really want to. And one of the things I noticed about actual paper is that it, whilst it visually helps people to, you know, share ideas, it also allows privacy, which a lot a lot of tools don't allow complete privacy. If you're doing something on paper, you can just say, no, I'm not showing it you. And I think the other thing was that actual paper does produce stuff, and then you've got the work of preserving it, making it discoverable, accessible, copying it, whatever else, but it is portable. So
Connects the project with my other projects. So you're using Kickbook, so it like cross-linking each other's documentation.
I mean, to an extent, yeah, but it's more just that you can find all of the projects I've worked on in the same organization, so it just kind of means that they're all there, findable together for me, not necessarily for anybody else. So
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. So I'm also we had like one-siders, and when I described the exercise, that's interesting because documentation would actually be all over the place in one aspect, because like audit logs and all like logs basically of activities what all of these could provide are documentation, but this is like an extra speciality, and that's something that nothing else popped up. So yep, we have dwork here again. So can we check what has learnings from here? What do we do with the tool?
This we do the treasury management for these guys, but I like the way they use dwork, because they have guys that generate leads for them, and they put like all the questions in the dwork task, like a bunch of questions they have to ask, and then so each task, all the information is captured in the task, and if they see something is missing, then they have to contact. That's the extra work it created, I suppose, is that back and forth of trying to get all the necessary information to move the task to the next section of. So, and then also it is, let me see, it also helps us to do the payments as well. So similar to the system you use with the, so if it's, we also told them if the tasks already did be paid, they must just add that audited tag to the task, then you know, okay, we can pay these guys. So it helps with payments, and also we are planning for the next iteration to use the exports for a dashboard to help measure the KPIs, because that's something they wanted to see. They wanted to see in the proposal. They said they're going to do this much, they're going to generate this many leads, create this many collaborations, and every time they wanted to see those numbers, but you know, you had to count each task on dwork.
So fully trying to capture the measurements of what goes into a project, and like all included in dwork, which is a great use case. The more I also feel like the more you can do in one tool, the easier it will be, but it also then has this effect that you need to standardize, and if like dwork is not nuanced enough, then it adds extra work.
Yes.
I would quickly share a few perhaps insights from Motherboard. I was trying to describe that, and main use cases what I've been using it is like visualizing different representations of processes, data changes, location, permission controls, and also, well, main use case I guess is using it for facilitation, which we are doing it for now. So that's cool. let's see the next task. Now we kind of have the sense of, okay, the tools we are using and like the state of tools and why we are using, how to use it, and like we have the comprehensive understanding that what are these tools doing and how much they actually, most of these tools do the same thing, just have a bit of like different like front end basically on how to do the same thing. And it all comes down to how you are most used to doing and what seem to be best in your like network. Anyway, next question: how does the tools you are using shape your work culture? So yeah, that's now basically that's an open question, and here is already some discussion has started, for example, with the dwork, that this tool requires to do a lot of tasks, separate them into discrete units, and then other opposite side is like this tool doesn't require that. I can see my whole work as a whole, and we kind of have a missing section here, like what could be that tool that would actually be opposite of the work. And then this tool is offline. This tool demands a good internet connection. So we have several times, if you don't have internet, then it's, I guess you're not gonna work. And sometimes the servers are down. I guess you're not gonna work either. So this kind of, yeah, won't know if this kind of map will start like forming out, but yeah, can start like taking one tool apart and share more information and see if we can create some like a network relations.
Which tools should we choose to do next?
Yes. For example, can we like, this says, this tool requires me to use English. This tool is in my language. Does Jira board or any other tool or Google, do they have translations? Like how many of these tools we basically? That's a whole place to start though, but.
So,
Since it is, sorry, go ahead.
well, I was just thinking of which tool to start with. The Google, you know, Google Calendar, Google Docs, Google Spreadsheets are really what, you know, I feel like Catalyst is. So maybe we should do that one. You know, just the Google suite. It seems like we're a Google centric. Google and Zoom and Miro, I think, are the, I would say, might be the top. I don't know. Would you guys agree?
Yeah, I'd agree with that, I think.
Because we do the town halls in Zoom, you know, all the spreadsheet documentation from the projects are done in Google Sheets, and a lot of the documentation is done in Google Docs.
Yeah.
So,
A lot
I mean,
of
our
Google
PDFs.
Forms as well.
so a great place for documentation.
And
Easy.
then
I don't know
Google
if I'd say
Drive.
that. I don't know if it's a.
Easy,
I'd say it's a
easy.
great place. It's just what gets used.
No place. Great as in big, you know.
Easiest way to share documentation.
I mean, it's free. That's another.
Right. Yeah. Right.
And from what I've heard people say, it doesn't. It even if you've got a shit internet connection, it's not too bad. It's not too heavy on the bandwidth.
Okay, so can be used without internet.
I mean, not offline, but even if your connection's a bit ropey, it's kind of okay.
It can be offline too. You can mark a file for
Yeah, that's
readable
true.
offline. Yeah.
Yeah, that is true.
It does require a Google account.
Good point.
Yeah, yeah.
And it requires you to sell your soul, Newman.
Only part of the soul, only part of the time.
Yeah, we're not supposed to let on that we realize this, you know. Most of the
Right,
time
right,
we
right.
haven't noticed.
We have
But
to
does
say,
it,
oh, I didn't know. In court later on.
but does it require account? Like it requires account to write comment,
Yeah.
or actually even comment you can do it anonymously, or it's requires account only for writing, I think.
Yeah, it requires an account to do project management. To be fully operational project management tool, it would require an account. But it is true that you can do some things anonymously if the other, for instance, a document, I think you have to publish it. There's like a special thing where you can publish it openly. I think that's for spreadsheets and calendars. You can do this special, but it requires like a special thing, which is good and a really good point. Actually, they're still making a small nod to the public internet. The old school web 1. I'm curious about languages other than English. How is the translation? Is Shinji's? Oh, they're just listening. Are there any other?
I did a Google form in Spanish the other day, and it was suggesting things in Spanish, but then the option at the end for other, it still just said other,
Okay.
and you couldn't change it. So that was quite weird.
Right. So there is an attempt at internationalization or just other languages. But I really do like that focus because it is a barrier to participation, and if your project is multilingual, then it really does. Your non-English speakers are going to have a more difficult time, bigger barriers, and it's going to affect that outputs. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's just funny because I always think in terms of language, simply because C4C, it's in our the initiative was different languages in different time zones, and so different languages is translation, but different time zones is sort of async work that doesn't require us all to be in the same time. So how does Google Docs and asynchronous work? That might be a next pivot to this part of the discussion.
So how does Google Docs and what?
Asynchronous work. Like most of these, like for instance, Zoom would be, or in Google Meet. I think they call it Google Meet. Is their Zoom, their whiteboard webinar thing.
I wonder if it would pull a bunch of tasks like these items from here and try to see if there is a difference. Like Zoom technically is maximum sync work. My robot is can be basically in the middle
Yeah.
for both. Meetup is only for sync work, I think, because it's like the idea of getting people together.
Yep.
I did see a protocol months ago about how to use Zoom asynchronously, and it was quite, I've never tried it, but you know, just that everybody has the host key. You come in, you start the recording, you say what you've got to say, you switch the recording off, and you fuck off. It was quite good.
That's brilliant. That would be a fun experiment, because you're right. We do immediately think of it as synchronized, but you know, there's ways around that. And yeah, that I can clearly see that as a process. Yeah, totally.
Curtis has his hand up.
Oh, thanks, Steve. Yeah, I kept interrupting Newman, and I don't like that.
Sorry,
so
bud. It's all good,
raise my hand. So a couple of comments on the translation. Many of these tools can be used browser-based. And of course, the browser, if you're using Chrome and stuff, it can offer translation services. So like dWork, you can have Google do the translation for you, potentially. And then Google themselves are very soon, I think this week, in fact, deploying some AI tools that will handle translation for any app, right? That's at least browser-based. And then anything that provides HTML itself, Google can translate if you're using Chrome or Brave. I think Firefox has some potential offerings, but that only supports, I believe, HTML code. Otherwise, you have to rely on the platform themselves to offer up a translation feature for multiple languages. Then asynchronous, I will say we've attempted that, and there's some cons to that. It is very quick to catch up with everybody reading audio or listening to audio files. However, because it's audio, you lose the text, and sometimes that can contribute to a knowledge management system, something that can be queried later, whereas audio, you miss out on that.
Right.
Yeah, I guess that puts audio files and video files into both the async work and sync work. Because it now, yeah, okay, I'm starting with the blurry. What is this? What is async work and what is async work? But then,
right.
Because sync work, for example, WordPress, I put it to synchronize it because to me it's like a website, and you go there to kind of capture the some latest vision, I guess, what was tried to be shared, or you try to sync up with where the information is, and you usually the WordPress is meant to be guiding you that information you're looking for from that team or that kind of node. And on the other side, asynchronously, I put Google Forms, Discord, and Gitbook. Although sometimes in Discord, I do happen to see that when you write something or somebody writes something, you get the immediate response, and then it turns into sync work. Although like usually the initial idea is it's asynchronous. I'm just gonna put it out there and you answer when you have time. Sometimes just some people at the same time.
That really makes me think, when we're talking about the culture that is produced by using such and such a tool, I think it's about getting used to the fact that you're asynchronous and that people are all over the world. I know when I first got involved in Catalyst, sometimes you'd feel hurt if you put something up there and nobody answered for like a day or nobody said anything, because you know, it's just like, it's crickets, isn't it? And you're just like, oh my god, everyone hates me. But you know, do you know what I mean? It's the culture of Catalyst that people are across time zones, and it takes a while to get used to that, maybe.
I think that's that culture of UTC, you know, of knowing all the time when it's UTC. And you know, like good morning from California, you know, like understanding that it's, you know, other people are in other time zones, other times of day. We all, yeah. And does the tool support that? Yeah. Because ultimately, and this is why I like this section about like the culture, like, because ultimately it is culture that we work with. I mean, I think that, in my opinion, that culture trumps the tool. Like, you can put a tool on something, but if the culture is not there, it doesn't work. For instance, C4C, we tried to use dwork, but it was just too complicated, did not fit with our culture. You know, it required too much. Now we could try to change our culture, but it was more, you know, like and the culture shifts from time to time because we're in between, you know, like, yeah. So I like this discussion about the culture.
Because I think also it's like sometimes maybe C4C knows very clearly who you are and what your culture is. But sometimes you can start using a tool thinking, oh, this is a great tool. And then you look back and 3 months later, it's just completely changed who you are.
Yep. These are not static, like culture, just, you know, how people interact, especially in innovation, because that's what we're trying to, I mean, yeah, I don't know. There's something about innovators like looking to shift or change the way things are, the status quo, that the culture is sort of amorphous and shifting, or wide and accepting of other, you know, the individuals. So there's individual culture, individual opinion, perspective, ways of being, ways of doing. And then when the, you know, two or more get together, then there's a negotiation or a sort of a third thing, you know, the cell membrane around. I don't know, that might be a little bit esoteric or philosophical. but
I was
I
just
think
thinking about
there's
the
something about
visuals.
individual. You got it.
I was just thinking about the visuals. So many collaborative tools look bloody awful.
Oh.
And you have to stop caring about what it looks like. And that took me a while.
Ooh, I'm gonna write that down. Because, and I don't know if there are any gamers here, but like the overlays, like, so when you first start playing, and my gaming experience was World of Warcraft, and I would like walk around in the forest, and then I would, you know, do this little, you know, it was all very beautiful, and at the end of it is just my screen was all these numbers and little, you know, popped up displays. It was all, I didn't care about what it looked like. I just needed the data, you know. And that's a great, I think that's a great comment. The visual and aesthetic of it, it definitely affects, and yeah, the game that you're playing, because project management is ultimately establishing a game and getting others to play that game, and how the game looks, it, you know, depends. Like, some games are really, really beautiful, and some games are just, you know, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, of course. But the taste and the preferences of the folk, and what you said was beautiful. The not caring about what it looks like. Yeah, I think that says a lot.
It's interesting that art actually does bring people together, because to me, marketing is like very illustrative part of that untangible, all of things we do, and that kind of describes the story in like art and in the tools. And that kind of also drives the culture, that if you always have like that front, very beautiful, people get engaged, and then they bring up like 2 tasks, and then the Google Sheet is shared, and nobody knows where somebody promises some rewards, and then these rewards come in tokens, and like, what? I don't have wallets, and then like all of this confusion stuff you have to learn about this new industry. It probably is a chaos in no matter way how we kind of approach this, but it's good to know that this is the case, like that we have so much to then kind of this is always going to be that for that first person to engage with us. And I see Curtis brought his hand up, but I was actually trying to close this cultural session and have a little bit demo, but perhaps you could come back to this in like the final questions or like what's coming next and final thoughts.
Sure. Yeah.
All right, cool, thanks. So the final part of the session is a presentation of the Open dApp framework. So with these discussions we're having, we are creating patterns and we're creating some revelations, and we put down them as frameworks. And the first framework was several sessions ago. And now I'm going to demonstrate one of these, how like a task process was created and all the actions in between. And keep in mind that one question, what I have for you, what are missing from the SingularityNet process mapping output? So I'm going to share a SingularityNet translation task process demo, and with that demo, I'm like trying to explain one part of that like framework and how we can look at it. And then, yeah, basically keep in mind that I'm going to ask you what are the missing from that, basically that map and output to understand it clearly. So the translation process was created by using dApp process framework. So that's the framework that we created several months ago now, and what we had tried. And in the first session, we had this documentation, location, and coordination management discussion. And today, now I'm going to introduce the task management process of how each steps goes and who are roles and how this kind of system was created. So the first view is like archive translation task force. So here is just a visualization of the process, how that task management evolved. It started from like these squiggly sticky notes. Each sticky note is an action we did in a dApp because we wanted to bring up all the actions and all the outputs we are expecting and in what state they are in the dApp and who is doing that. So it's like a cross-check task management, and we had each of these had like its own section, each of these tasks. But then we found out like dApp isn't able to export sub tasks, and we couldn't really figure out how can we like review a task in a way that we are able to extract it without manual work. So we had to do some we then realized we have to do the manual, we have to do different tasks, but how do we connect them together? So here you can see a visualization of two different tasks, one where one task creates new tasks and then kind of closes in old one. And in that design process, then we had, because we always like come back to this board, we join in a meeting and share, okay, how can we improve this? Does this make sense? And then we realized, okay, that a lot of tasks and actions are kind of not really related to the task itself, but more like what you do in dApp, what is the action. So I turned around all of these tasks and then created like a different visualization. And now that is currently like the final version of how to demonstrate the process framework. So a SingularityNet translation task process mapping is a visual representation of the steps involved in translation process, including actions and transformations that take place between them. And here is like the final example, which I'm going to share you. You can, in the Marvel, you can find links in the corner. So if there you see an object, then it actually leads to some other resource. And we use this visualization to like visualize the key components of like a task management or a project. And then we identify abstract models or design patterns. Like, okay, we want to introduce a new role to this process. And then it's like easier to abstractly look at this and kind of apply what kind of activities we would do or actions. And yeah, that this is like helps to evaluate their effectiveness of when we try to improve a process. So now I'm getting into how the template is used. So this link leads to the Singularity.net process squad meeting where I had this documentation available. Here is on the top, there are these previous task management, like setting up infrastructure, all the guides and documentation where the coordination happens. We're not going to touch the stuff on this meeting. So, but bringing your focus on the color codes of the sticky notes. So the first color code is a task name. If I zoom out, these are all the different tasks then we are mapping as this like a full process, like invitation task. So if it's a we are talking about onboarding like translators. So it is an invitation task, onboard translator task, translation task, so translating the task itself, and train translators, so something that we train the translators to become self kind of manageable. And then all of the sticky notes in middle are basically roles. So yellow roles are onboarding and project management support. So if I zoom out again, then you see there's a bunch of yellow ones. And if you compare it to the translator role, so the translator who actually does that, there's only 4 tasks. We zoom in, then we can see the example of invitation tasks, which means the translator joins the dWork, submits their preferred language and interest, and then project manager support takes it over. And the next time translator is engaging is in the interview. He's having an interview. Stuff happens. Now he has to claim a task, submit translation, and there is nothing else. And what else happened is these other roles kind of manage that translation itself, revert back to him. There are like ways that it comes back to that. If you kind of zoom in, that's not the goal of to go in details. But that kind of gives you a visual representation that if I would start describing an entire project, it kind of starts making sense that you can differentiate what roles have kind of more are engaged and what steps somebody is involved in. And also like when you open up a dWork itself and you're kind of confused what to do with the task, then you can map it back to this framework and see what is the next expected step. And then if like a task arrow moves from one space to another, so submits, and this arrow itself is actually an action, but if it crosses over like to do and in progress boundary, so because we are currently framed in dWork, then it means that that action should be moved. And yeah, in final note, we didn't really know what actually had here. So in the done, what does it mean that the task is done? It is showing onboarding performance. Onboarding translator shows onboarding proof. Translation task, proof of translation. And train translator use dWork, proof of task management. So yeah, this is an overview of the framework used to like manage processes. Now the question, did it make clear if you open this kind of page up, does it make sense where the task is, or what are the first like questions popping up, or what is missing, what is a relevant step I didn't describe? And if there isn't like something that pops up right away, then next question would be, what tasks do you think it will be fun mapping next? So a bit of information about future, that we expected to do a third session about taking feedback now about what translations, well, like what, not translation, but what tasks would be interesting to process like that. And then we're going to do like a workshop session about doing this kind of mapping.
Well, one, I think, I mean, just to start it off, I think that's a good use of the mapping and trying to figure out how dWork, helping folks use dWork and giving some type of process or framework that will, what do they call it, guardrail you know, so that you can say, all right, here's a prescriptive way to do it. It's just like, you know, in some way of working with what I want to do and what the tool does, and you know, like a tutorial or a framework, you know, a method. But it might, it's still a bit opaque. So it would be good to go through one with you to you know, take a task. And I'm trying to think of a dWork task. Little Fish, we wrote a review of a tool. And so, yeah, how might that be? Yeah. And, you know, they gave we used the another framework, the Agile story gathering framework, to create the task description. So there was a user story, which is basically that defines who the user is and what they want to do. And then we use acceptance criteria in the task. So I can kind of say, as okay, it needs to be, you know, this many words long. Actually, we created our own metric for like what, you know, what the standard was. So there was a standardization and a grading scale. They've done some work over there at Little Fish. So there's a grading scale of so they review and they give it a score of 1 through 4. You know, 1 being, you know, unacceptable, needs revision. 2 is acceptable but needs a revision. 3 is acceptable, and 4 is you know, an outstanding.
So these are applied to the tasks people do and the bounties, and somebody kind of just doesn't say it's done or not. They grade them,
Yeah.
And then at some point they aggregate together all the grades, and if it's acceptable.
Yeah, there's it gives the reviewer, again, it's sort of guardrails for the reviewer, so they can say it's not they can substantiate, defend, give reasons for their opinions. They can say, well, because it was too short, it's unacceptable. You have to go through, and it says, you know, like it gives a rubric or a matrix for saying these things. And and it helps the reviewer and it helps the task doer to sort of, it's just the rules of the game. I'm on this whole, like, project management is a game and it needs rules in order to play the game. You know, if you just have a ball, you know, if you're just gonna, you know, if you set out to play soccer and you just have a field and a ball and a square with a, you know, a goal, you know, anything can happen. But if you say, okay, it's gonna take this long and you can't go out of this area, and you know, there's rules. You can't grab me and I can't grab you, you know, there's just rules. Oh, okay, I see Curtis has got his hand up.
No, no rush for me. No, I just wanted to add to, I think it would be potentially valuable to identify identifying the type of work that you're supporting. So for instance, Little Fish, because that's what you mentioned, Newman.
Yeah.
Little Fish, some of those tasks can be fairly subjective, meaning like how you analyze the performance or grading the work being done within Little Fish community is subjective. Some people may say, oh, that's great. Some people may say, well, you could do some, you know, better work.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's like a coding team, and that informs the guardrails that you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Like, so it's almost like identifying what is the style of collaboration, and that helps inform and identify the proper guardrails.
Yep. And yeah. Yeah.
You're
Hey,
muted.
Vanessa.
Oh, sorry, I forgot I had my hand up. Yeah, just commenting on both of those, when TV, when you said what's missing, looking at that framework, to me, what's missing is flexibility, because it is quite atomistic and very structured, and not everyone works like that. And I just wonder how, do you know what I mean? You could end up feeling in practice when a task, if you've mapped a task like this in this way, in practice, it doesn't necessarily work like that. And then you feel, oh, we're failing because we're not fitting this schema. And I just wonder if it, I mean, some people want more and more structure, but some people don't. So I wonder if maybe that is what's missing, is the potential for flexibility.
In that specific process, because we are taking a dwork as an example, we have this rough framework we need to fit, that is that the task only can have 4 different stages: to do, in progress, in preview, in done. And that's basically the framework, because I'm just gonna.
Yeah, but let's say in practice, somebody's doing a translation task and they submit it, and then somebody's reviewing it, and then they go, oh shit, no, I needed to write it differently. And so they're still doing it, and the person is still reviewing it. And then you end up feeling, oh, we're not conforming to the framework, we failed.
But that's the kind of point of this framework, that if this kind of different situation happens, what right now is like, it's not about like conforming to framework, it's knowing what to do when somebody did a task, but somebody reviewed it, said it okay, but so now the other person is doing it again. What's the situation of that? If you move it to the in review, people get rewarded, the task may be moved over, because you already established the culture with other people that, oh, in that state or in that situation, you do this, and they don't know the nuances. And this process mapping, yeah, this is perhaps like only one method, but the idea is that you kind of try to cover all of these different nuances. And if they are like too micromanaging, then you at least have the understanding that there are the situations where if it turns into micromanagement, then do this, or you have self-responsibility in that case, or in that case, talk to the reviewer or somebody who.
Except there is a human element in this, and if somebody's being micromanaged, then they very often don't feel able to say, hang on, you're micromanaging me. So do you know what I mean? I'm just saying that it suits some kinds of workers and it doesn't suit others.
I'm still unclear on the because let me tell you, I want to make dwork work. Like I want to make, like, because I plan on doing projects, and I plan on doing projects with a lot of different people, and I want to do projects with a lot of different people with a lot of different cultures and ways of doing it. And I would love to have a process, and that is to say a game that we can all play together, that can lead us to the goal, and not that can include everyone. Everybody can play and play to the best of their abilities. That's the other part. But I think that this might give me a key, but I can't see it. It seems like when I zoom in, is this a graphic of another Miro board? Because I can't read the.
If you click on the top corner, there is a quick link to the original.
Yes, there it is. Duh. Thank you.
These are just pictures.
Geez. I was so excited because I was like, what is this? And I'm like zooming in, and I was all freaking out. I was like, you can't read, my eyes are bad. I was literally on the other screen, like making an appointment for an eye doctor because I wanted to read this so much. Okay, now I got it. Thanks, man.
Sorry, that's funny. So I'll provide, my take on dwork based off of what you just said, Newman. I don't personally feel that dwork is a project management tool. It is more geared towards a task management tool. It just doesn't offer a lot of the features that a project management tool should. And so if you break up and you have, your own board for a specific project, then you can kind of track all that within its appropriate scope. But when you start to zoom out and you're trying to manage multiple projects, that's where dWork kind of lacks. And then just wanted to throw in another opinion that I like dWork. It's a very simple, you can deploy it very quickly for small projects, 2-week long, maybe a month-long project. But when you start getting convoluted and you need sprints and tracking hours and such, it just doesn't offer any of those features. GPTE, I'm a pretty big advocate of that because it's similar to dWork, but it allows the organization or community to establish a reputation system. And then that reputation can be applied for qualifications for future tasks. And maybe this particular task requires, oh, you've contributed at least 3 or 4 previous tasks to the team, which means you understand these guardrails, you understand the process and the tempo of the way this community works. So by establishing a reputation system, you can build on that. And that's a direct replacement to something like dWork. However, it operates very similar to dWork.
What was that? GPTE?
Yeah, GPTE. That's Gimbal Labs' version of dWork, essentially.
Oh. Is it, they have a link? Is it something that's open? Can we?
Yeah, I can find the link for you.
Yeah, because that's a I haven't heard of that.
I kind of have heard of that all the time, but in my background of mind, it's like it's still not like usable or like out there to take over the dWork management. But it's definitely something we should keep an eye on. So I dropped the link and.
But yeah, I mean, I do want to, and I don't know if we're off the rails, but I'm curious about the way to get these project management tools, and I don't know if it doesn't work. I mean, and it's weird because I've believed in the project management sort of ethos for a long time, and I've tried to bring it to teams, and they all have a reaction of like, no, that's not us, or I don't do it that way. I'll never do it that way. That's not who I am. And I'm like, and I used to be like, take a walk, or I would be angry at them, or I would get angry, angry at myself or angry at the tool or whatever, and try to force, like, no, or, like a military, like you got to do it this way. And, but I don't, and now I've changed from that. And I'm like, no, let's listen to what's going on. And maybe project management is, there's too much bathwater, not enough baby, type of situation.
I think this is about co-production, isn't it? If you go to somebody and say, this is the way you do it, then naturally it's going to get their backs up. And I think it's about whether a tool is responsive and can respond to how people already work, or whether it imposes a way of working.
And when you say that, I think of like these general suites of tools, like Google Suite. It's just like, okay, here, or in a weird way, ClickUp. Like ClickUp has just this big field, like they're like, okay, here's some stuff, you guys figure it out. But it takes a real commitment to develop a one-off kind of, it takes commitment to do that type of co-creation, like down to the bare minimums of how one, or how groups, how groups of people work together. And it takes like a lot of like communication if we don't offload it and say, we're agreeing to work with this framework. And that's why Tevo's framework here is like, okay, this is at least the starting board, and we can adjust the rules. It's kind of like in our facilitations where we're like, okay, here are the rules for this next hour. We're gonna raise our hands, or we're gonna talk over each other, or it's gonna last this long, or we're gonna use the other standards. I guess that's about standardization, but then we agree to it. We say, oh no, let's do this, or let's do that. It's sort of like this, these agreements, like partnership agreements that are verbalized and not necessarily standardized, but verbalized and agreed to. I guess that makes.
I think sometimes it can be about what we were saying before about visuals. When you're presented with a structure where it's very grid-like, then it feels as if everything is discrete and there can be no overlap. And in practice, that's not how a lot of people work. So it clashes with their culture, I think. Clashes with mine sometimes.
Excellent point. That is an illustration of that point we made earlier about the graphic design, the UI. Curtis, are you getting this? The conversational thing. That's why I think that this new AI and the conversational interface is a game changer, because I think what Vanessa said is valid. I mean, and it may not even be something that, like, I don't mind the grid, but it may be something that I'm not even aware of that, like, boxes me in literally. So it's like, oh, here I am in the box. Well, but if you're in a conversation, I think that for me is that's a breakthrough kind of zone, like UI map.
Don't get me wrong, I don't mind a grid, but I just think sometimes it does make you think in a certain way.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. That's my point. And it's sort of funny because it's just like, yeah, I don't mind all these things, but then you find yourself building boxes and you're like, why am I building all these boxes? Yeah.
Sure. I will say that those comments do what I was going to share about culture, it kind of wraps all that in, and I can wait till the end because I know we're in a time crunch, but I agree. And that the choice that the tool that you choose to use will translate into your culture.
Yeah. And jumping in there, I think that if we have a culture that accepts that we're going to change, that we're going to reflect and see and listen to ourselves, listen to others, and then change, that we have agency to change, and that we can use all these different things, if we're in the sort of, box versus conversational, like we can say, oh, this is a time where we need boxes, and this is a time where we need conversations, and that we become adept and free with our own ability to respond to our environment for effective results. That doesn't, I'll stop there, because no, this is, I love conversations like this because I think that they are really, really valuable.
And that is true that we have indeed spent 90 minutes on this session and went over time, but that's okay. They are great discussions. A final thing I will throw out there is a session feedback link, and that is another KPI we do for our workshop, and there are like some questions we ask from you if there are interest to improve it, and we actually even distribute rewards for participating here.
It just occurred to me, Tivo, we should probably share that at the start of the meeting, because people deserve rewards if they were only here for an hour and then had to go. Isn't it?
Yeah, it's like a secret. It's like a secret trap door at the end of the meeting. It's like, if you make it to the end of the meeting, if you know the secret word that we just push in somewhere, it's kind of like, yeah. But that I don't think is your intention.
I will share the link to Andre.
Yeah, and oh, Shinji's still here. Hey, I hope that you've got valid stuff from this. Thanks for being here and listening in. That's cool.
Yes,
Well-
Curtis wanted to have final thoughts. Do you want to share your or yeah,
You said my Miro board?
your final thoughts? Yeah, you mentioned that you're in a time crunch, but in
Yeah, so
Sensoriate, people have time behind recording. In the
it was
YouTube.
mainly the culture topic and tool selection, and it does wrap into what Vanessa and Newman were talking about. These tools, I feel like, fall in one of two categories. Either they're a product or a platform. And ClickUp is like a platform where I feel like dWork is more like a product. It's meant to be used with specific intentions, whereas ClickUp, it can be used many different ways. And when you go towards, say, a platform, it's assumed that you're going to build your use case. You're going to design and create processes to build that culture. If you decide on a product tool, then the culture's kind of already been defined, and you have to evolve your culture to adopt that style, whether that's visual or tables and graphs and data driven. So understanding your processes and your culture to find either a product that fits your culture, or you transition to a platform which requires more upfront effort to design the thing, but it gives you more flexibility to introduce your culture into that platform. And I think that's a decision that many people need to make upfront.
Yeah. And thank you, Curtis. That was lovely. And what I got mostly from that, well, one, this idea of the difference between a platform and a product, great. But really, the nugget for me was that understanding my culture, my process. If I go to a platform, I really have to have a firm understanding of that, which is why I love this. We begin with self understanding, and some people use this Japanese method, the ikigai, but there's in every culture, global, in every language group, there's a defining yourself, self-knowledge part. Yeah, that's lovely. Thank you.
It's interesting to me that what you described is a product, the defining self-knowledge part, and the product is Ikigai method. And so that we apply products to platforms, is that then the kind of the realization we come to?
Yeah, exactly. That products are built on a platform. Yeah. And that you can either choose a product that is, for instance, Curtis and I looked at a project management tool called clarity.so. And he's like, oh, this was built on Notion. Notion is the platform. Clarity.so is the product built on the platform of Notion. And he's like, well, might as well just get Notion and build your own product. But yeah, that's a good distinction. I think you said it correctly, Tebo. Do you think he's got it right, Curtis?
Yeah, you just explained it perfectly. Newman, I completely agree. I love that Little Fish is trying to design, because there is the other aspect of personal ikigai and then organizational ikigai, right? And Little Fish is trying to figure out how to actually make that drive itself, because you do have how I operate and how I like to operate, but then how does that mesh well with the organization or the community that I'm working with? And then there needs to be a form of consensus of, okay, here's standards and processes of how we'll collectively operate. That's the culture that you're establishing. But it does need to take into consideration the personal ikigais that make up that community.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's decentralization. because the community you can kind of think of as the edges. You know, we're pushing the decision making and the culture creation to the edges where the people are. But there is this requirement of not necessarily centralized decision making, but decision making, and I think that fits in there. I think that fits in there somewhere.
So, I would say decision making is not related to product or a platform, and it's like comes from higher level, that the culture defines the decision making, then what, or and
Well,
so that, yeah, I don't know.
I see that
Yeah,
the culture defines the process defines the decision making.
yeah, like where the decision points, you know, happen. I like the game analogy. So if you just get a group of people together randomly, and you know, something, maybe some initiating event, you know, gets there, and they're like, okay, well, what do we got? It's like, okay, we've got a ball and we've got a grassy field, and they're like, well, I really wanted to play basketball and I wanted a hard court. It's like, well, but we don't have a hard court. It's like, well, we don't have a soccer ball. We've just got this basketball. You know, I don't know. It just has to be negotiated. And then the negotiations happen at the edges, based on like what people bring. That's their ikigai. But that at some point, the organization itself, and thank you for allowing me just to talk this through. At some point, the organization itself has to create an organizational will or personality, you know, with needs and wants and aims and goals and values and stuff, you know, that hopefully is co-created or based on the foundations of the people that make up the group. But of course, you know, the people come and go because somebody's like, well, no, I really wanted to play basketball, so I'm out of here. Oh, you know, there's that old thing about like take the ball and go, you know. So it's like, okay, now we've just got a grassy field with no ball. Who's here now? Okay, what do you all want to do? Yeah. So decision making may not be the correct term, but I think consensus is the correct term. And it's just like SIP 1693-4, you know, Voltaire. You know, the very first things is like, when do we agree that this agreement is not valid anymore? You know, like, when do we agree that the rules need to be changed, and that yeah. So I think we are talking about governance eventually. And it's a great, I mean, it's like, I was like, man, all my Catalyst groups are just, they all talk about governance. It's just, that's all they talk about now. It's just great because I think that's what we're involved in.
Yeah.
But I don't mean to sidetrack. I apologize. Thank you for allowing me the time to talk that out.
Yeah, this project management is basically a centralized version of governance, and decentralized project management is then, to me, decentralized governance.
Yep.
So that was a nice ending. We actually got another mind map out of the culture, which gave another perspective of how to look at how these tools and things kind of change our perspectives and our lives, and how we're not actually even able to perhaps track how we change in 6 months later, and we have to do retrospectives. And now when we talk about it, looks like retrospective itself is a tool which is based on culture who likes to do retrospectives, and some just burn ahead and just pull. Thanks for joining for this session today. And that was a great learning experience. Got some data. What coming next is basically we are gonna now pull that information from the video again, trying to analyze it a bit more, find things which was not able to do notes from here, add it on the board, use your feedback to refine the framework in the background. Then in coming weeks, hopefully this month, I will provide an overview video, which is shorter for those who are not able to crunch all this almost 2-hour video in one scoop. Then I will make like a shorter version of that introduction and share it out to everybody. Yeah, stay tuned for the next session in upcoming months and stay aligned. And
Thanks, Steve-O.
Thanks, Tevo. See you later, y'all.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks, Steve. Bye, everyone, and bye, Shinji,
Bye.
even if you can't speak.